And good evening, everyone. Welcome to this Facebook Live as we discuss post our Rebound special about the year that it has been. A year like no other, most likely, in all of our lifetimes. So we are here to hear your stories, take some comments, get some feedback after you just watched the special right here on WPTV and on our streaming platforms. Michael Williams and I, of course, joining you for about the next half hour. We also have two special guests with us tonight that are going to be able to provide some expert advice and to answer some questions if you all have questions that'll apply to each of their fields. But Michael, I guess you and I can just begin, it's going to be something we look back on for the rest of our lives and say 2020.
Kelly, you and I were talking just the other day, and I know you and your family, I and my family, anybody has said it's a marker in our lives. We've all had loved ones who've been impacted directly or indirectly by COVID. Many of us, including me, have loved ones who've lost their jobs and careers because of COVID. We've seen the stresses firsthand. We've tried to cover those stories for you at home, trying to give you resources through our Rebound project to try and help you cope. But it's a story that as long as they're writing history, 2020, like 1968, like 1929, 1861 will be a year that is a pivot point in U.S. history. And this pandemic, the first in 102 years, is one that we literally will say redefined our lives, the way we work, the way we communicate, the way we deal with health. And with that in mind, Kelly, we have our two guests to help you navigate everything you just saw and where we're going from here.
Absolutely. We want to bring into the conversation Lynn Gassant is a human resources professional. And Lynn, we'll start with you, and then we're going to introduce Dr. Rachel Needle in just a moment, a licensed psychologist and with 211. But Lynn, first of all, from your perspective, and we can only speak from our own perspectives, but you know what I mean. Tell us something. What was the past year like for you personally, first of all, and then we'll get into what you've dealt with as you've helped people deal with COVID life.
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, it's some of the things that I've experienced as a professional was high turnover and company downsizing. I mean, that was huge. And from there, I've also, it was hard, well, luckily for me, I was pregnant during the pandemic. So for some, it wasn't that bad, right? But a lot of people lost their jobs. So now that we're looking, a lot of job seekers are not motivated to go back to work, right? Especially because they're collecting unemployment. But in a personal note, it's just, I think, it was just kind of hard to see a lot of company downsizing and still downsizing till this day. And there's a high turnover with employees right now. Still, they are leaving the workplace. And it's hard for a lot of companies to find quality employees to bring back to the workforce because a lot of candidates are more selective and negotiating more because there's not a lot of positions available. I had a candidate recently who said, well, I'm collecting unemployment, so I'm exploring my options before I go back to work. So, there's a lot that has happened during this time. And, in a professional setting, I think, trying to recruit talent for the workforce or for some of our clients here at Virtual HR has been really tough and a challenge.
I think you bring up a point. We're not going to make this political, even though that's what I cover a bit. But your comment about people saying, well, for a while longer, I can maybe be a little bit more choosy with unemployment benefits helping me out. That's a good thing. It's also part of a political debate. But we'll save that for another day and another broadcast. We're going to focus on how people watching can move forward with your help. And before we do that, Dr. Rachel Needle, licensed psychologist on the board of 211, which all of you know is a wonderful local resource when you're having issues, whether it's about a job or your mental health or anything in between. 211 is the place to go for those resources, and we'll give you a way to reach them in a moment. But doctor, first of all, thank you for being with us. Give us your perspective on the last year and sort of shape where we are, where we've been, where we are, and then we'll jump off to where we're going and begin to take viewer questions on ways you can help them navigate the mental health challenges for themselves, whether it's about a job, about their children who felt isolated with school. Kind of tee it up for us, doctor.
Sure. Well, life has changed in so many different ways over the last year during the pandemic. And for a lot of people, it has had consequences and impacted our mental health. For those that weren't suffering before, but especially for those that already were suffering with mental illness, including substance use disorder. This has created increased barriers. We're seeing many more calls and a much greater need for mental health professionals. Many people suffer, experiencing a lot of anxiety and increased stress, depression. And this is in, regardless of, gender, socioeconomic status, age. We're seeing this across the board and so many different challenges. So it's been a really difficult year given all the uncertainty, all of the changes, and in so many ways.
Well, we brought in, I want to put up the 211 number, and then Kelly's going to take it away as we start with questions. And we want to bring in your questions, you viewers at home. We have an HR expert. We have a licensed psychologist. You have a question for yourself about your children, about where you go from here, about how to find that next job, about you have two experts who can help you. 211, I do want to put it up. It's a wonderful resource. You can call 211. Chat online at 211palmbeach.org. You can also call 211 on the Treasure Coast. I want to make that very clear. And they deal with family counseling, issues about depression, those who might have suicidal thoughts, alcohol, drug abuse, divorce, employment, financial problems. Really, I've done a lot of work with them, as has Kelly over the years. They're a wonderful resource. So really from there, Kelly, as we'll take it away with beginning with questions about how to help our viewers. And for all of you at home, weigh in with questions for our two experts.
Please do. I do have a question for you, Dr. Needle. When you were talking about kind of all of the negative side effects of what we've all dealt with, loneliness has to be something that people probably never expected to deal with in the way they've had to deal with it in the past year. And not just those who live alone or are elderly, but just that lack of communication. And when you're able to see someone, oh, I'm so glad to be around people. I'm so glad to have that. We need that human experience. So what has that done to us?
And as you do that, also, let's put up Patty Seamus's comment because it talks about people who've been isolated. Patty, Kelly, Kelly, I think that comment's apropos to what you're talking about. Kelly, if you want to read that.
That's right. Patty says, I suffer from panic attacks. You were addressing the anxiety just a moment ago, Dr. Needle. So this year's been very stressful. I've not left my house in a year and I'm afraid to leave. So we can unpack several things there. First, you're alone. So you're dealing with that. And then your anxiety really kicks into a level that you have not experienced before. And then you're now afraid. So dive into all of that for us.
Yeah, so I'll start with what you were talking about, Kelly, and that's the loneliness and the isolation that we have collectively experienced over the last year. And it's been really challenging, especially for people that, most of us do thrive on interaction and touch too, right? Touch is something that is soothing and is good for our mental health. And that has been lacking for so many people, especially those that do live alone and don't have families or significant others. So it's been really challenging, and it has led to, again, increased anxiety, difficulty sleeping, even, traumatic responses. This has been a traumatizing time for so many people. And I'll tie it into the comment about not just social isolation, but panic attacks and the increased anxiety around leaving the house. And for those that already struggled with that, this uncertainty and the mixed messages that we've been receiving, but really that's as a result of this is an unprecedented time. This is something that not only have we not dealt with, but physicians have not dealt with. So they are learning as we are learning. And so not being able to have definitive answers is incredibly scary. It is, uncertainty, I think, is what leads to more stress, than anything in all areas, not just during the pandemic, but in general. It's one of the reasons, something like cancer, not knowing, will it come back? What is the treatment? It is so anxiety provoking and difficult on people. So we still are in that position, right? With the vaccine even being here, seeing some hope, there's so much uncertainty. What is the efficacy levels? Is it going to work with, the new strains? Who can get it? Who can't get it? And so much more in between. So it does make sense. And I'm sorry that, the person that posted and so many others have been dealing with this anxiety. And I encourage you to, of course, reach out for your own personal support, people in your network, if friends, colleagues, family members, if you have them. And if not, of course, please reach out to a local mental health professional. Always know that you can call 211. I know you mentioned that here and we'll continue to mention that. you will always get a voice on the other end of the line.
And Lynn Gassant, from your HR perspective, for those people who are saying, I'm sitting here now a year later, maybe I lost my job, maybe I'm employed again, but underemployed, not working at the same level of ability that I had, and certainly not the same income. As we sit here a year later, what are some of the basic markers and pieces of advice you can give from people who are in transition, are still unemployed, or are underemployed? Break that down a little bit about where people can go from here and give them some concrete steps to be thinking about.
Sure. I mean, I think the basic step is to make sure that you have an updated resume and have someone look at it for you, a professional. I mean, we also review resumes. So one of the things is that a lot of people, because they have been maybe working for an employer for so long, they have never touched a resume. So number one, we want to make sure that your resume is up to date. And second, start looking and applying. And one thing I've learned is that when you're applying for positions, you apply to so many positions as possible, as many positions as you see, to increase your chances. And also, do like some mock interviews with someone or professionals to make sure that you're prepared. So when you go to a job interview, you can increase your chances of getting this position. As far as, there's opportunities out there. And I think the great thing about, even though there's some negative and, with COVID, the good thing is that a lot of companies are now providing virtual opportunities, which is an advantage for a working parent. And also, even if you're not a working parent. So, if remote work is one thing that you are open to, that's a great option. Indeed is a great source. LinkedIn is like another source to really search for professional employment, depending on the industry that you were interested in. Indeed is like the number one source. And then LinkedIn is the other professional source. So definitely resume. And then those two top, job search, platforms are a great way to go to start looking for employment.
Lynn, a good point about that. Are there any free services that might help people do their resume and that sort of thing? Because you're right. If you've been in the workforce and now you've been out of it and you don't even know where to begin, you may have to really update that resume with key phrases and keywords and make sure it's going to be, seen by the right person. Anything out there to help people with that?
Yeah, I mean, Career Source Palm Beach County is really great in providing support with, resume writing. And also they are connected to a lot of employment opportunities and employers. So anyone who's in a position where they're not able to afford, a coach to help with resume writing or, preparing for an interview, definitely, I would say, reach out to your local career source, whether it's Broward, Miami, or Palm Beach County. It's definitely a great way to start, and the service is completely free.
And Dr. Needle, as you look at people who are looking for a basic blueprint, obviously, if you need professional counseling and mental health counseling, you can go to crisis resources like 211, not just for crisis, but also for that. But as you talk to people and we're getting comments coming in, what would be sort of a basic blueprint when people say, I feel a little bit lost, and they've got the double whammy. The job made them depressed because they lost it. They're not employed the way they want to be, and they're in that spin cycle. Trying as best you can, and I know it's somewhat generalized here, but give some advice from a mental health perspective of how people begin to work out of that rut and where they can go. We've talked 211, but what you say to some of your clients about that. I know you've seen many over the past year who've dealt with everything we're talking about.
Sure. And I think it's important to first accept where you're at, right? It is okay and normal to be having the feelings that you're having, right? This is incredibly difficult, an incredibly difficult time. So accept that and be okay with where you're at. Make sure that you're acknowledging your own feelings. Again, being able to talk to somebody, whether it's a professional or, a friend, is a great start. Make sure that you are connecting regularly, because that is really important, and it can be virtually if that's the safest way and how you feel comfortable. Luckily in South Florida, we have an outside option that is, you can be outside in distance and it's beautiful weather. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. So even if you're, it doesn't have to be something that costs a lot of money. Be creative, do things that make you feel good. whether it's, exercising, go for a walk outside. That is really a great way to boost endorphins and feel a little bit better. So anything that makes you feel good. Exercise is first one that comes to mind. Doing something for yourself, like taking a bath or just reading. Disconnect from technology. I always encourage that. I think that's really important to be able to get through anything. And again, I think it's important to give back any way that you can. It makes us feel good about ourselves. So that's something that you could think about doing, as well as doing things that you do have control of. There's so much right now that we have no control of, that we want to do our best to take back control of things that we can control.
Don DeWitt writes into Patty, who'd written and said, I'm scared to go outside. She mentioned get outside, sitting outside, getting a little fresh air, see the sunshine, give thanks for nature. So people helping people in our community. Kelly?
I just wondered what you think are some of the positive takeaways to both of you ladies, what the positive takeaways are for people after living through this unprecedented year, what we've learned from it.
I think that's,
go for it, Dr. Needle.
Sure.
Sorry.
I think that is something really important to bring up, right? Because we do want to focus on the positives. In all situations, we can take something from that, and it's really great for our mental health to be able to do that. So I think the first thing is that we are very resilient, right? As people, we will come back from things. We are resilient. We are resourceful. I think the community coming together in so many ways has been, one of the benefits of this really crazy and awful and scary time. Knowing that we can count on, there are a lot of places and people that have offered free meals to those that couldn't afford at the time. There are, organizations that have done that. There are people that have offered, I know at, my office, Health Psychological Center, we have not been turning anyone away who can't afford services, because this is so important. 211 has, everybody has stepped up and increased their hours. So I think just knowing that we're resilient, we can work together, that there are people out there that will support us, whether or not we've even known them, right? We're all going through this together at the same time. And I think for many of us has brought us closer together.
Lynn?
Yes, I agree. And to add to that, from the HR perspective, I do want to mention that, there's a lot of more opportunities, especially, virtually for people to work at home. So definitely productivity is great, because a lot of you don't have to drive to work. You don't have to drive to work to, you don't have to drive to work anymore. So, a lot of people see it as an advantage. Well, okay, if your kids are at home and they're learning remotely, and then you working at home, so it works out. So I think, in addition to what the doctor says, just the fact that a lot of employers are more flexible, they are more caring, they are willing to listen. And a lot of them are putting the EAP program in place, which is the employee assistance program that a lot of employees were not using prior to COVID. So now they're using it. So, if you don't know, perhaps you may not know about the EAP. Most employers have an EAP program in place, as the doctors mentioned, since the topic is Yes, employee assistance program. Since the topic is somewhat related to mental health, getting that type of support, your employer have that service in place. It's part of your benefits package if you're a full-time employee. So as an employee, you get, if you say, hey, can you tell me about your EAP program? Most employers will tell you about it. So if you cannot afford, to see someone, the insurance may be able to cover some of the sessions for you. And a lot of times childcare is one of the services that they also provide, where they help you locate services that are within your reach, and that may be covered by your insurance as an benefits that is there that a lot of employees may not know. So definitely ask your employer about the EAP program, because it's there. It's just like you probably don't know about it, but now is the time to ask about it.
And Dr. Needle, and that's wonderful advice. Thank you, Lynn Gassant, again, with Virtual HR and Company, and thank you for the HR advice. Doctor, to that person at home who's employed and trying to juggle work or looking for work and dealing with their own stressors and worried about their children. We've heard so many stories about young people, students who feel they've been unmoored by the past year. So 2 pieces of advice. How does the parent deal with those stressors themselves going forward? Because it's not over yet. And what are the warning signs, the caution signs as they look at their children especially perhaps teenagers, but I think every age, what they need to do and where they need to go for help. So if you'll take that in two parts, please, Doctor.
Sure. So in terms of, I'll start with the last one, things to look out for. So I always tell people that the most important things are changes in behavior. And in order to recognize those changes, you have to be paying attention. You have to be connecting with, whether it's your friends or your children on a regular basis. So make sure that you're spending time, perhaps every night at dinner, right? Make it a point to ask questions, how your child is doing, how they're feeling, and be aware of any changes, whether it's changes in eating, behavior, mood, sleeping patterns, anything that you can notice would be a sign of something changing, something different. They're maybe at risk, and talk to them about it. Don't be scared to communicate with your child and ask them very direct questions about what they're experiencing. And even if they thought about hurting themselves before, because that's usually how we find out about these things. So I'd say, communicate. And for parents, as much as you can, try to take at least a few minutes every day to take care of yourself, to, if that's a possibility. For some, it's not so much, but make sure that you are doing at least one thing a day that's for yourself with the time that you can, whether it's for 30 seconds or for 30 minutes, whatever you can take. And I know a lot of people are talking about panic and anxiety, and I encourage people to, do some sort of anxiety reduction technique at home, whether it's some mindfulness. There are some great apps for that, like Calm and Breathe and Headspace. You can do them for 2 minutes. It doesn't have to be a lengthy amount of time. Also, some sort of grounding techniques or breathing. And you can do that, while you're going to the bathroom even. It could be something that doesn't have to take up a lot of time and that you can do simultaneously with something else, but make sure that you are continuing to do that or trying it out, because it can be really helpful.
Great ideas. I was just sitting here. Here we are on International Women's Day, and there have been all these stories in the national media over the last couple of days about, Lynn, the number of women who have left the workforce permanently. And really, they had to when their children were at home and schools were closed and all of that, and that a lot of them are not going back. I mean, the stress in particular on moms, on women, has been tremendous this year.
Absolutely. I agree. And what I've also heard too, a lot of parents had to, especially working moms, had to resign from work because perhaps the childcare the kids was going to shut down, and the amount of money that it costs to put, if you have more than one kid in childcare, it makes more sense to leave your employment to take care of the kids than to actually have them to stay in daycare. So, there's a lot of advantages, disadvantages, and, some women perhaps needed that break too. So they taking that opportunity to take that mental break and just taking care of themselves. And when they're ready to go back to work, they're just going to go back to work. Let's talk about mental health and taking care of yourself.
And I think it's important to embrace those changes. For some, looking at the other side of this is they're getting to spend time with their children, and that they wouldn't have previously, had they remained in the workplace. And I think also another advantage of this is just being able to be real and human with each other. So you're going to be on meetings, and perhaps your child's going to walk in and maybe they're dressed, maybe they're not, maybe they're throwing toys at you, right? We're all human. And again, we are all going through, parallel experiences. And I think being real brings something, really important to any work that you do.
And as I talked to three extremely capable professionals on this day, on International Women's Day, I have three young women who are in the workforce of my own, my daughters, one of whom was furloughed for a time. So again, I think almost any family has seen the arc of the pain in one form or fashion. I see all heads shaking. I don't think any of us have not, from COVID itself or the ramifications of COVID, not felt its pain this year. So we really are. Sometimes it sounds trite to say we're all in it together, but this is one case where we really have been. As we move forward, and as we ask you at home, please, if you have comments or really questions for a wonderful HR professional, a wonderful licensed psychologist who works with 211, send them your way. But to people said that, I just need that helping hand. Now, you've talked about it, but our audience joins us in and out of this broadcast. For those who just joined, Doctor, again, best advice on how to cope and where to seek help.
Sure. So my best advice how to cope is, seek support if that's something that most of us need that. Make sure that you are maintaining connection, social connection in whatever way is safest and possible for you. Make sure you are not being too hard on yourself. Accept yourself for whatever, emotions and mood swings, whatever you're going through, and make sure that you reach out for help if and when you need it. Please, that's one of the most important things is make sure you reach out to a local mental health professional or call 211. And if you need help or if you just need someone to talk to.
And we've put that graphic back up. And Doctor, you and I would want to remind, we all would, 211 in the Treasure Coast as well. We have the 211palmbeach.org, but you can call 211 throughout our region. So I want to be very clear on that. And family counseling to help us with depression, suicidal thoughts. You have somebody to talk to, alcohol, drug abuse, divorce, employment, financial problems. We will put up, because we know this is a time where it's been extremely difficult. We do have the National Suicide Hotline number as well, I believe, that our producer can put up. Now, in our area, that will lead you to 211, but they can provide all the same kind of resources. So please, if you're in desperate need of help, please call 211, or you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. If you or you know of someone who, because of the burdens of the last year, is dealing with those deepest and darkest thoughts, please, there is help out there. 1-800-273-8255, or simply throughout our 5 counties, call 211.
And Lynn, just as you were saying a little bit earlier, kind of look for the opportunity, because there might be more within your field if you're out of work, or maybe in a field where it's easy to adapt your skills to that field. So you're saying that this year, on the positive side, will be more opportunity in some cases.
Agree, and exactly that. And I wanted to add that if you are not an Indeed, I recommend creating a profile and allow recruiters to find you. So Indeed have this feature for employers where when we're looking, regardless of the industry, the employer can just go on Indeed to their employer profile and search for your resume. So once you have that updated resume, create that profile and make it searchable. So then when you get that phone call, you know that your resume was found through Indeed. And also LinkedIn. If you are not using LinkedIn or do not have a LinkedIn profile, LinkedIn is definitely the place to be. I mean, professional networking. It's a great opportunity, number one, to create a profile. And if you go and look for the job search, you can see the employers or the recruiter who posted the position, and you can reach out to them and introduce yourself. So definitely, there's a lot of opportunities, starting to come up. I mean, you have to apply for them, but Indeed and LinkedIn, just as I mentioned earlier, is definitely the platforms that I would start. And ZipRecruiter is also another great platform. And you don't have to pay for any premium account. You can still get a job through the free account in all 3 platforms.
Lynn, sometimes people are afraid to get off the sideline. It's tough losing a job, and can I get back in the game? And how do I, is it going to be a mark against me that I was unemployed? Is there a bit more allowance for that with employers now? And what really should be the realistic expectations? If you had a job that was at this level, maybe you're midway through your career, what should you sort of expect at least right now? The economy is beginning to show signs of picking up, but set the expectations for people.
I mean, as far as expectation, I would say number one, do not be afraid to apply for a position that is within your level. And if you have the flexibility to accept a pay cut too, you might, allow yourself to be open to that, because when you get an opportunity to get into a company and you can prove yourself and show your work ethic, it's easy for you to prove and move up within, move from one position to another. As far as like what it looks like, it's just one of those things where if you are transitioning into a new role, when you updating your resume, make sure that the skills that you're putting on your resume are transferable. I mean, a lot of things that we do, the skills are transferable. So just make sure you highlight those key things that you have been doing if you are transitioning from one career to another. But if it's the same professions and you're not sure, how many people I'm competing with against, I mean, do not worry about that. I mean, if your bills have to be paid, we just got to, start applying. So you hope to get that positions, and don't, because some places when you apply, it tells you how many job seekers apply for that positions, and when you see it, you're like, well, what are my chances of getting this position if I apply? Still apply. And one thing I always say, if you see your positions on Indeed, also take the time to go to the employer website to submit the full application. So that way that the employer can see your application in multiple sources. That's like an inside secret here I'm sharing. But don't be afraid to go out there for sure. And you may have to look at your finances to see if you're in a position to take a pay cut. And if you're not in a position to take a pay cut, just keep pushing, keep applying, and know your worth. I mean, if you know you're worth that much, just be confident. And as far as gap in history, because some people may say, well, I've been at this job for so long, I've been at this position for over 10 years and I don't have anything else, to show. I mean, it shows that you were a committed employee. You were not looking to leave that employer. That's commitment, and you just have to make sure you elaborate on the skills and what you bring to the table. So don't let that be the reason why you don't apply for positions. And if you have gap where you move from one job to another, just be ready to explain, because some women, sometimes they're out taking care of their kids. They may have two positions. And sometimes you have two positions because you have to pay your bills, and it's okay. It's just a matter of being transparent with the recruiter or the employer, whoever's interviewing you. And wherever you're meant to be, I always say that you will be. So if the position meant for you, it will be, but you have to be transparent. If you have to take care of kids, hey, I have to take care of my kids. That's what I had to do, So
Right.
Don't be scared. Just go out there and apply for your positions, and the position that is meant for you will be.
Laura and Aaron Shevlin writes, and believe and achieve, and there is certainly an element to that, Kel.
I was just going to say, way to go, Laura. Just keep putting a nice little bow on exactly what we were talking about, was kind of believing in yourself, putting yourself out there. And again, that career source in various counties can help you with some of that resume building, the physical part of it, and actually putting it together if you haven't done that in a while. I like that tip as well.
Why don't we're coming up on the half-hour mark. Last chance to get any questions you specifically have for our HR expert or for our licensed psychologist, Dr. Rachel Needle. As we're doing that, though, Doctor, closing thoughts as you, perhaps the question you hear most often the past year, or as people now are trying to transition to what comes next. If you can begin to wrap your thoughts on what you're hearing, best piece of advice you want to resonate with people long after we're off the air here, and then also with you, Ms. Lynn Gassant with Virtual HR and Company, HR business professional. Doctor?
Sure. So I think what I hear most often is just, how am I going to move forward? I'm scared to do things, how do I know this isn't going to happen again? So just a lot of fear coming up. And I encourage people, again, to, first practice some relaxation strategies, seek help, as well as, cut yourself some slack. I think that's a really important thing, that we tend to be very hard on ourselves, that we shouldn't be feeling this way. Why don't we feel better yet? Why are we struggling in the way that we are? And, again, this is a time that has been challenging for everybody. Cut yourself some slack, focus on things that do make you feel good and that you can, take what you can out of the situation. We've seen a lot of people having to pivot. We were talking about with occupationally, right? Embrace and accept your feelings and the pivot. And if you need help, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Lynn Gassant?
Yes. And then I think one of the most questions that I've received is a lot of job seekers are taking that opportunity to transition into a new career. And I think their concern is really, hey, can I do this now? Question is, yes, you can definitely, transition now. And as I mentioned earlier, don't be afraid to transition into the career that you are looking into. One thing I will also add is that think of people that you have networked with, or maybe former employers or supervisors that you have worked in the past. Perhaps you can, if you see a position that is posted, and especially if you have a LinkedIn, account, and I can't stress how important that is. If you do have a LinkedIn profile, once you're connected with, former supervisors and other people, you can see who's connected to that position, and you can always ask for self, introduction. So definitely networking is great. And if you have not networked in the past and you worry about that, it's okay. Just reach out to your previous supervisors or whoever that you have worked with, colleagues, and if they can help you, definitely. And I would say that now is also the time to focus on cover letters, right? We talk about resume a lot, but if you're looking to transition into a whole different field or industry, the cover letter is when you want to make that personable approach and introduction to let the employer know why you're looking to make a transition, because then not only they read it, they see your resume, they may be open to have that conversation with you to see why you're looking to transition, especially if it's a position where, you're willing to accept a pay cut and they can't afford someone, at a higher level, and you're willing to come in to use your skills. It's a win-win. So definitely, we talked about, believe to achieve it. If you put yourself out there, not just, one position, just multiple positions, one person definitely will be in contact with you.
Excellent advice and some hope and inspiration for us, which everybody needs as we start to see a little bit of normalcy on the horizon, which we're all excited to get to. Once we get there, it'll be a great day, whenever it'll be normal. I don't know, whatever normal is anymore.
New normal.
The new normal.
Normal. Exactly. Well, Lingasant, thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Rachel Needle, thank you so much for joining us and giving all of us some really great takeaways after quite an extraordinary year.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everybody for joining us as well on Facebook and every other streaming service. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.